August 1910. 1,000 fires smoldered across the American Northwest. Routine. Until the day relentless winds whipped them into a single inferno. Entire towns vanished in minutes. 3 million acres incinerated. And 86 lives lost. Yet almost no one saw it coming. If America's worst wildfire disaster could erupt from scattered embers and overwhelm every defense, what made this catastrophe so unstoppable? And what did it force the nation to change forever? Spring faded into a summer without rain. In 1910, the forests of northern Idaho, western Montana, and eastern Washington dried to the point that pine needles snapped underfoot and creeks shrank to threads. Precipitation records from April and May showed some of the lowest totals ever measured in the region. By June, thunderheads rolled across the mountains, hurling lightning but little water. Each strike left a smoldering scar, 1 here, 5 there, until dozens dotted the map. On July 15 alone, a single electrical storm sparked countless new blazes deep in the backcountry. But nature wasn't the only source. Coal-fired locomotives, hauling timber and passengers through the wild, tossed hot cinders into the brittle grass and brush. More than 100 fires started this way along the tracks, sometimes flaring up hours after the train had passed. Logging camps, mining crews, and even firefighting backburns added to the tally, each spark a new threat. By mid-August, the U.S. Forest Service estimated between 1,000 and 3,000 separate fires burned across the region. The agency tasked with response was barely out of its infancy. Founded in 1905, the Forest Service had never faced a test like this. Its staff was small, its experience limited, and its resources thinly stretched over a vast, inaccessible landscape. That summer, it managed to recruit about 4,000 men, many with no firefighting background, to battle the growing crisis. Most worked with little more than shovels, axes, and wet gunny sacks, often sleeping in the woods and eating what they could carry. Communication was slow, and coordination between crews was often improvised on the spot. Fires smoldered on hillsides and canyons and along riverbanks. Some were contained, but many were left to burn, judged too remote or too small to threaten towns or timber stands. The scale of the problem outstripped the tools at hand. As the weeks wore on, the number of active fires only grew. The land waited, parched and silent, for the next spark or the next gust of wind. On August 20th, a cold front swept across the mountains with winds that reached 70 miles per hour. The effect was instant and catastrophic. Gusts slammed into the patchwork of burning timber, fanning each separate blaze until walls of flame leapt skyward. What had been hundreds of scattered fires fused together in a matter of hours, drawn by the force of the wind and the physics of heat. The air itself seemed to feed the inferno, as hot updrafts from the flames pulled in fresh oxygen at gale force, like bellows stoking a forge. Firebrands, chunks of burning wood, rode the wind, some landing as far as 50 miles ahead of the main front. Each ember started new fires in untouched forest, multiplying the threat far beyond the reach of any firefighting crew. The firestorm moved faster than a horse could run, advancing at up to 50 miles per hour. By dusk, entire ridges and valleys were engulfed. The sky darkened as smoke blotted out the sun, turning afternoon into night. Trees exploded in the heat, and fire whirls, miniature tornadoes of flame, spun through the canyons, snapping mature pines and larches like twigs. The scale was nearly beyond comprehension. In just 36 hours, 3/4 of the season's total burned. More than 2 million acres were consumed. Flames hundreds of feet high flattened out in the wind, sweeping through towns and timber camps with almost no warning. The firestorm generated its own weather, creating a feedback loop that only ended when the cold front finally brought rain. For those in its path, there was no time to organize or escape. The event had become unstoppable, setting the stage for the stories of survival and loss that would follow. Wallace, Idaho, stood in the path of the inferno. By late afternoon on August 20th, the wind-driven flames reached the edge of town. Trains loaded with women and children pulled away just ahead of the fire, racing for Spokane and Missoula. Those left behind, firefighters, railroad workers, and townspeople, watched as embers rained from the sky and the air turned thick with smoke. Within hours, 1/3 of Wallace was gone. Homes, hotels, and businesses collapsed in the heat. For many, escape came down to seconds. Burning trestles gave way minutes after the last train crossed, leaving no route back. The speed of the fire left little room for hope. In the forest beyond the towns, crews fought to hold the line. On Setzer Creek, the entire 28-man lost crew was overtaken. No one survived. In total, 86 people lost their lives in the fire. Most were firefighters and railroad workers, caught in places where the flames moved too fast to outrun. Edward Pulaski, a Forest Service ranger, led a crew of about 40 men near Avery, Idaho. As the fire closed in, Pulaski remembered an abandoned mine tunnel nearby. He forced his men inside, ordering them to lie flat as the heat and smoke grew unbearable. When panic threatened to break out, Pulaski drew his pistol and threatened to shoot anyone who tried to flee. He knew that outside, the flames offered no mercy. All but 5 of his men survived the night. Pulaski himself was badly burned, but lived to tell what happened inside that tunnel. The toll was measured not only in acres lost, but in lives cut short and families changed forever. Survivors described a sky black as midnight at noon, the roar of wind and flame, and a sense that the world itself was ending. The big blow-up left scars on the land and on the people who faced it. Proof that no amount of courage could always stand against a fire moving faster than thought. No matter how many men the Forest Service sent, the fire always seemed a step ahead. Crews worked with shovels, axes, and little else. There were no flame-resistant clothes, no radios, and barely enough food or water. Many wore their own boots and hats, and the only protection from smoke was a wet handkerchief tied over the mouth. With thousands of fires burning and no centralized command, efforts to control the blaze fractured into isolated struggles. Orders traveled slowly by telegraph or messenger, often arriving too late to matter. As the crisis deepened, the Forest Service turned to the U.S. Army for help. 2 companies of the 25th Infantry, black soldiers known as Buffalo Soldiers, were dispatched to northern Idaho. These troops dug fire breaks, evacuated towns, and helped restore order as flames advanced. Their discipline and experience under pressure brought a measure of stability, but even the Army's best efforts could not halt the firestorm's advance. The sheer speed and scale of the blaze overwhelmed every plan. After the smoke cleared, questions fell hard on Washington. How could so many have died? Why had so much land burned? In the months that followed, Forest Service leaders combed through field reports and Army logs, searching for the answer. They pointed to the same gaps: not enough gear, not enough training, and no doctrine for fighting fires of this size. The agency's own reports admitted that most crews had little more than courage and luck. In April 1911, the Forest Service issued a new directive. Every fire should be controlled by 10 a.m. the morning after it was reported. This would become known as the 10 a.m. policy. The logic was simple: never let a small fire become a big one. It was a promise born from disaster, enforced with new funding and federal manpower. Yet this drive for total suppression would have its own consequences. By stamping out every blaze, forests grew denser, underbrush thicker, and the stage was set for even larger fires in the decades to come. The fight to control nature had begun in earnest, but the rules were still being written. Wildfires now burn nearly twice as much United States land each year as they did 30 years ago. As climate extremes intensify, the lessons forged in that inferno grow only more urgent. What we choose to remember and what we're willing to change will shape the next century of fire. Share your thoughts below.